The story I'm about to tell happened to me in 1990. I never got other explanations about what happened, nor did I really understand what happened. At that time, I was newly married, and I worked as a guard at a company quite far away, and I came home late at night. We lived in a remote neighborhood in a city of only 5,000 people, and my wife stayed home with our newborn son all day while I worked. Our neighbors were nice. One of them, which I'll call Josh, lived next door to my house and was also married and worked for the same company as me. From one of the windows of his house, it was possible to see the roof of my house because his house was the only two-story house on the street. I had just moved to that city, and as soon as I moved, something caught my attention. The number of people with schizophrenia in that city was way above normal. Only in my close neighborhood 2 neighbors were schizophrenic. A man in his 40s, a former police officer, and a black woman in her 40s too. I didn't pay much attention to that. I was focused on my work and my family at the time. It all started when some rumors started circulating in my work. Some people said to me as they passed the company's entrance, "Watch out for the man with a cape," always in a mocking tone. I hadn't connected it to anything yet, I just thought it was some kind of joke. The company I worked for was very large, with several buildings in its conglomerate, and also several units spread across the country. One of the activities I had to do during my work was the night round, which took place every night, mainly before the shift change time, around 2 a.m. Before starting the round, I had to go into a room on the 4th and top floor of one of the company's buildings to activate a system that monitored the timing of our rounds. Only part of this building was used, as it was already an old building, and 2 of its 4 floors were deactivated. To get to this room, I had to take the elevator to the 3rd floor and then climb the stairs to the 4th floor, following a very large hallway with several rooms also disabled along the way, until I reached the place where the schedules, the card punching machine and the equipment for rounds were kept. It was a very cold and rainy winter night. The temperature should have been around 12 degrees Celsius. I left the guardhouse, crossed the parking lot, entered the old building and took the elevator. There was only me in that place, due to the time, which was already past midnight. I went down on the 3rd floor and up the stairs to the 4th floor. As I went through the places, I had to turn on some switches to turn on the lighting in the rooms and also in the hallway, but not all the lamps were turned on, due to the electrical system being deteriorated by time. So some places on the floor were dark. I arrived at the room to get the equipment and punched the card to start the round, and after a few moments I heard in one of the rooms on the floor, a noise of something being dragged. I was surprised, because I was alone there. I tried not to care about that. After a few moments, I heard the same noise again. So I went to see what it could be, if there could be someone else on the floor besides me, despite the late hour, it being past midnight. I walked down the hall, straining my ears to hear from where the noise came. As I was looking into one of the rooms checking in, out of the corner of my eye I saw what appeared to be someone crossing the hallway and entering another room further on. Then out loud I said, "Is anyone there? Who's there?" Then I heard a low, muffled voice saying, "Anon." At that moment I thought it might be some friend of mine playing a prank. I then walked towards the room where I had seen the figure enter. This was one of the rooms where there was no lighting, due to the building's electrical problems. I opened the door and looked around, but there was no one inside. When I was already inside the room, I felt like someone was watching me. It was a strange feeling. Then I looked towards the open door. I saw some distance away in the hallway, a black figure standing still, as if it was looking at me. When I saw that, I got goosebumps all over and I was terrified, because I was supposed to be alone in that place. The scare was so great that I staggered backwards and ended up letting my glasses and radio fall to the floor. Then it started walking towards the room I was in, looking like it was going to go in there. So I got up, ran and slammed the door shut, locking it. After that, I felt and heard some bangs on the door, as if someone was forcing it open. It was horrible. It went on for maybe a minute, and then it stopped. I stayed inside waiting for a while. As I didn't hear anything else, slowly and very carefully I opened the door and took a look at the hallway. There was nothing else there, but one of the windows at the end of the hall was open. I grabbed my radio and my glasses and called my coworker, telling him what I had seen. Police was not called at that time, but all guards were on high alert. I still had to make the rounds that night, as other guards did too because of the alert, but visibility was very low due to the rain. 2 weeks later, one of my co-workers, Thomas, started exhibiting some strange behavior. His memory wasn't good, and he lost concentration easily. I was a little upset by his behavior, but I believed he must have been going through a difficult time in his life. A couple of days later, it was night and I was in the backyard of my house. The backyard of that house was half covered, and there was the laundry area, and the other half was uncovered, where my wife hung the clothes. I was in the covered part and talking on the phone with Josh. The night was very rainy and I had heard some strange noises coming from the roof. It was then that the connection started to fail. Still, I could understand what Josh wanted to tell me. According to him, there was something on top of my roof. I kept trying to talk to him until the call dropped. I heard some noises on the roof above me. So I went into the house. I could hear, as I closed the lock, the noise of something walking on the roof tiles heading towards my neighbor's house. I heard a flutter of wings and a high-pitched shriek. As soon as the rain passed, Josh came to my house. According to him, there was a huge creature on top of the roof looking out with huge green eyes, which looked like two illuminated headlights. It was a totally surreal creature. It looked like a huge bat or a gargoyle. It was all black, like a shadow. It was about 8 feet tall, and whatever it was, it had huge wings similar to a bat's wings, with a little horn on the central tip of the wing. The creature also had small horns and was crouched down, sitting like a dog, and had 3 fingers in each of its claws. The creature then looked at him, and stared at him for a few seconds, before shrieking and flying into the night. He said that when he flew it was like it had strips of cloth or something hanging from its body. It all felt surreal to me, but as I had been through a bizarre experience a few weeks ago, I believed it. Josh wasn't someone to tell lies either. Another week went by, and Thomas, that guard who worked with me, stopped going to work. According to some friends, Thomas had a psychotic break and was in the hospital. After a week of the roof incident, I began to notice that Josh was acting weird. He had lapses in concentration, much like Thomas's, but without the memory loss. I questioned him about it, and he attributed it to tiredness. The next day, a Tuesday, I arrived home and found my wife crying in despair. Due to the time and place we lived, my wife was always worried, and only calmed down when I got home. On Tuesday nights I left work early and arrived home around 1 a.m. She said she was anxious for me to arrive, and decided to wait for me at the front door. The street was deserted, only a few cars passed, and she continued there alone, looking in the direction I would arrive. The neighborhood was half deserted for not having so many houses. She was keeping track of the time on the clock, when she noticed that it was promptly midnight. At this very moment, suddenly she starts to hear a sound like a whistle. She kept looking for where that whistle was coming from, given that where we lived there were no night guards. So when she looked in the direction of the sound, which was coming from a crossroads near a nearby wooded area, she saw something very strange. It was a shape resembling a human being, but grayish in color and looking like a beggar. It was as if his clothes were all in tatters, but he didn't walk, he floated in the air, seeming to move randomly at a very high speed. It would move to one point and stop, then go at very high speed to another point and stop again. She was horrified, not knowing what to do. It then looked at her, and she could see 2 big green eyes. Then on an automatic impulse, she ran into our house. A week after the event, Josh missed work. I learned later that he had been admitted to a psychiatric clinic in the neighboring town, as he was hearing voices in his head. That same day, I arrived home, and as soon as I entered, I heard my son crying. I went to his room, and when I got there, I found my wife standing in front of the crib. I called her, and she seemed to wake up. She looked like she was sleeping standing up. Not 3 days passed and she started having memory lapses. She went about her normal routine, but said that large parts of the day were missing from her memory. I confessed that I had already connected the dots. I already had a sense of what was going on with my wife. Days later, she stopped recognizing me. I quit my job and took her to a town where there was a famous psychiatric clinic. I tried to take care of her inside our house, and I had a lot of help from family members, both mine and hers. But unfortunately, she had to be admitted to an institution. I confess that was one of the most difficult moments of my life. It was like a piece of me was ripped off. Years later, in 2018, looking through the internet, I think I know what that thing was that caused us so much suffering. The only explanation I have is that it was some kind of horror, something that feeds on people's consciences. Still, I don't understand why I didn't have the same fate as my wife, my neighbor, and so many others. I learned later that 7 other people went crazy that month alone, but as soon as the sightings of that thing started, they stopped.